The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Pierre Poilievre won 2024, says Stewart Prest, a political lecturer at UBC's Political Science Department. But there wasn't an election in 24. What seemed like a certainty in early December now appears to be a scramble to hold on to a fighting chance. Political strategist Kareem Allam says, "I feel bad for him. The winds of change are blowing in the opposite direction, and these are things that are out of his hands, and they're not breaking for him." Poilievre had made Prime Minister Trudeau and his carbon tax policy the issues he wanted Canadians to focus on. But on November 26, 2024, President-elect Donald Trump posted, "On January 20th, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States." And from that moment forward, Canada went from a so-called post-national country to one where nationalism has soared. And that rise in populism, coupled with a new Liberal leader, has swung the polls from an outright victory for the Conservatives to a questionable outcome for the Tories, says Allam. I invited Kareem Allam to join me for a conversation that matters about the direction the country is going and whom he believes will form the next government. Kareem, welcome.
Thanks for having me again, Stu.
May you always live in interesting times.
We definitely do. No one could have predicted we'd be here a year ago, but yet here we are. A 30-point lead is what Pierre Poilievre had over Justin Trudeau, and that lead has completely vanished.
Like completely vanished?
Completely vanished.
Like according to 338, as of this morning, Carney's in the lead.
Carney's in the lead, and what's more important to understand about the numbers is the Conservatives have a voter efficiency problem. So for the Conservatives to actually win an election, they actually have to typically be 6 or 7 points ahead of the Liberals. So if they're 3 points behind, they're actually 10 points behind. So to be where we are today after all the turmoil that we've experienced and seen is really quite something historic.
Is it just Trump, or is it that, you know, the message around Trudeau and carbon was yesterday's fight and Poilievre can't find the right messaging now?
Yeah, before we get into maybe the performance of Pierre and the performance of Carney, let's talk maybe just a little bit more about the landscape. On one of the conversations live that I did on a panel with you, I talked about one of the most important things for Conservatives in order for them to win elections is to have a strong NDP to carve votes away from the Liberals. So Brian Mulroney had Ed Broadbent, and Stephen Harper had the benefit of Jack Layton and that orange crush. Without that, Conservatives have a really hard time winning. But beyond that too, Conservatives also need the Bloc to do well in Quebec, where they typically don't do well. And with this rise of, pro-Canada nationalism, the Bloc's numbers are collapsing too.
So yeah, they're down to about 7% at the moment.
They're down hard. It's not likely that they're going to turn it around. I don't anticipate that Quebecers, are going to revert back to separatism in the next 25, 26 days left in this campaign. But these two depressed political parties in the NDP and the Bloc are actually what's fueling these large Liberal numbers. So these are largely out of the control of Pierre Poilievre's hands. Maybe earlier on, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, he shouldn't have been as hard as he was on Jagmeet Singh. Hindsight's everything. But the point of the matter is there's nothing that Pierre can do to make Yves Blanchette and Jagmeet Singh perform better.
No, he cannot. And it's remarkable to see how the NDP have just literally faded from the landscape. As 338 was saying, they're down to 11%.
Yeah, and I've seen some polling where they've also been in single digits. But when you think about, the NDP's performance, you think that their numbers should actually be better than where they're at. A lot of the big, affordability measures that Trudeau was championing, dental care, pharmacare, and childcare were all things that Jagmeet Singh pushed for in the last 3 or 4 sessions of Parliament.
And got a lot of what he wanted.
He got a lot of what he wanted. But despite that, the electorate's punishing him for some strange, odd reason. We could speculate on what some of those reasons are, but the lesson that's starting to come out of this is these confidence supply agreements between parties. Typically, the junior party, we're starting to learn, they get hammered in the following election. We've got some experience that here in BC with the Horgan and Andrew Weaver.
Right, they got punished for that.
That's exactly right. And now it looks like Jagmeet's getting punished for that, despite performing well for his base.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So, as we take a look at, what are the top issues, it's clear that Trump is number one. And there is an uncertainty about who is going to be best to deal with them. What's your take on, let's talk about Carney and what you believe he brings to the table in this. It literally is a confrontation with the American president. And then what does Poilievre bring to the table?
Yeah, I think the Trump issue provides, there's two dynamics as it relates to the Conservatives. Maybe I'll start there and then I'll go to Carney next. The first is, there was a poll, I think, by Angus Reid that showed that 1 in 5 Conservatives in the country would consider joining the United States as a 51st state. So there's a percentage of the Conservative Party that is entertaining this idea. And that's a very precarious place for the Conservative Party to be when the issue is who's best, when the ballot question is who's best to beat up on Donald Trump.
And ensure that we remain a sovereign nation.
And ensure that we're a sovereign nation. And so you saw the Conservatives struggling a little bit with the messaging early on about the tariffs. We saw Doug Ford quite adeptly and quite quickly take on the mantle of being Captain Canada. And we saw Danielle Smith do the opposite because her base is very pro-Trump. Pierre probably needed to act more like Doug Ford and probably needed to act less like Danielle Smith in that moment. And once he went to that Danielle Smith route, I think Canadians tuned him out and turned him off. And I think that produced an opportunity for Carney to come in and be the Captain Canada that Doug Ford had been doing in that interim period during the Liberal leadership race.
Well, do you think the Brookfield thing is going to hang on Carney at all, or do people go, yeah, that was a corporate thing?
Yeah, I think that there's a relatability factor there that if I were the Conservatives, I'd be trying to hammer on for sure. Carney's very establishment. His name is on all our money.
Bank of Governor.
And
you can find his signature there.
That's right. And this morning, Jagmeet Singh had shown that Brookfield Asset Management was buying depressed residential assets here in Canada and charging up rates on some of the poorest renters in the country. So there are going to be some issues definitely in terms of his likability and approachability that the Conservatives need to try to start to exploit in order to try to regain back some of that momentum. I think another area where the Conservatives should try to position themselves, I think the record of the Liberals on public safety has left a lot to be desired. Border security has been an issue that has impacted street disorder here in Vancouver in particular. So I think those are the areas where you could see the Conservatives starting to move to in the next few days.
But coming back to our initial point right now about being the right person to interact with and negotiate with Trump, I don't actually see anything that Poilievre brings that's special to that equation, and that has to be front and center at this point.
Well, that's precisely what I think the Conservatives are finding so frustrating, is that typically it's the Conservative Party that's the party of the economy and the party of, being foreign policy hawks. And Carney has really gone out and done a much better job in demonstrating he's got a better understanding and handle of the economy. His announcement this morning on the increases in defense spending, he sounded like Stephen Harper. He sounded very likable to a lot of Conservatives. But the Liberals have packaged up Carney in a way that makes him look like a Stephen Harper on the economy and on foreign policy, but a very soft, kinder, gentler, Care Bear type of Stephen Harper. Where he's still quite compassionate on some of the more social justice-oriented issues. So it's pretty hard to outflank someone who's promising everything to everyone all the time.
Well, I found it interesting that right after he was sworn in as Prime Minister, his first trip was to France and England, and then to the north, to the Arctic and Canada, to say we are now going to start to focus in on and bolster our defenses here, which is, of course, what the Trump White House wants to hear.
That's right. Well, I was surprised to see him go to the UK and Francis's first trips. But when you peel it back, it was brilliant. One, it shows that he's got a commitment to diversifying the economy and reigniting those traditional relationships that we used to have as a country. So the first three significant engagements he had were to two of our founding nations. And then the third one was to another founding nation, with meeting with national indigenous leaders as well,
right.
And then going to the north. So
and still no visit to Trump.
And still no visit to Trump. But what I think Carney was trying to signal is that our history as a country, the founding peoples of our country, are going to be the path that I'm going to take out of this quagmire that we're in with the United States. So I thought it was very interesting messaging. But the brilliance of also going to the UK and to France as well was the press gallery there is much softer and kinder to foreign leaders than it would be here. So it gave them a couple extra days to get level set and media ready to deal with a very rabid and aggressive and sophisticated press gallery here back home who wants to engage with him.
So one of the issues, of course, is that when Trump issued that tweet on, or well, whatever it was, he's on his own platform, he's not on X he used the reasoning behind it is that you got leaky borders and we've got illegal immigrants and a huge fentanyl problem that's coming both from Mexico and Canada. And there seems to be oh yeah, no, the fentanyl and border issue isn't ours mindset here. I don't hear people bring it up, but it's my understanding that it's important. Do you think it will play at all in the election?
It will have to play some kind of role in the election because ultimately this is what the legal imperative that Trump is using to break the free trade agreement. There's a clause in our free trade agreement with the United States that on issues of crisis,
national security
being the key one, they can suspend the free trade agreement. So that's the legal prerogative that Trump's bringing in. But we know that less than 1% of the fentanyl coming in the United States is coming from Canada. But still 1% is too much. But there's also an issue of the fentanyl that's coming into our country too that we've got to be concerned about, regardless of where it's coming from.
We do have a problem, and
Absolutely.
Particularly in British Columbia. I mean, we are the epicenter on the West Coast. Now, interestingly enough, I know you point out that very little of it is actually going to the United States. So much of it is going into the South Pacific. But it is an issue, and it's one that the Americans have been paying attention to for a long time, and we haven't stepped up. And so, as you say, Trump uses it as an excuse to invoke these powers.
Yeah, and so my view on this, Stu, is that this isn't a border issue. This is a seaport issue. We don't have a leaky border with the United States in the way that Trump is describing, but our seaport terminals, less than 1% of the containers that are coming into this country are being inspected.
Right.
And there is a cost inspecting those containers. Like, it would slow down our industry and our trade. But at some level, that's where leadership is needed in this country to address this issue. Is the stuff's coming in through the Port of Vancouver, the Port of Montreal, the Port of Halifax, and we're not inspecting the containers where these drugs are coming into. So it again presents an opportunity for Pierre, it presents an opportunity for Carney to jump on this issue and help us end this toxic drug crisis that we're in.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Let's talk about carbon tax, because Poilievre had made that the issue. Axe the tax. And what's the first thing that Carney does once he signs his name to the document that says he's going to be Prime Minister? We're reducing the tax to zero. Now, I don't know whether or not that's just a clever little play on words, because he's not in a legislative position to do it. But the intent is that he's going to then remove the consumer
component
of the carbon tax. This issue seems to have fallen so far behind in what are the headline issues now, and yet it is still a significant part of the way that we're going to move forward. So who's going to win that fight?
Like for me, I think the issue's been taken off the table. Liberals are really great campaigners, and one of the things that we've seen from Liberal campaigns in the past is they'll typically take away ideas from the Conservatives and the NDP. Again, going back to what I said about Jagmeet Singh, they've taken all the credit for all the things that Jagmeet Singh's done, and now they're going to start taking credit for all the things that Pierre's been promising as well. And
well, I saw, I guess, an editorial saying that Carney's already adopted all of Pierre Poilievre's platform and made it his own.
That's exactly right. He's stolen the best ideas from the NDP. He's stolen the best ideas from Pierre Poilievre, and he's made it really difficult for the Conservatives to maneuver. The Conservatives got outflanked, outmaneuvered, and all this happened because the Liberals had one thing that Pierre didn't. They had the gavel. They were in power, and they had the ability to implement some of these things before the election was called.
So carbon tax is just like off the agenda from your perspective?
I think so. I think it'll become a more prominent issue for Carney if he wins the election and becomes Prime Minister. If we're talking about national energy corridors, something that came out of the First Ministers' conferences, I think that there's some level of carbon tax that industry could accept on the basis that we get this national energy corridor. If that's the deal, I think that would work.
Yeah.
So, but if there is not that national energy corridor agreed on, I don't think there is space for a carbon tax for industry to accept at all.
So that actually brings up another interesting issue. No to energy infrastructure projects, no to energy and natural resource development, or we're going to slow it down, scale it back. Suddenly now we're embracing that as going, oh, this is what could save us. It's amazing how Donald Trump has changed the landscape so much that we are turning away from what had been such an environmentally strong agenda, saying we're going to protect the earth. And now we're embracing energy projects as our economic lifeline.
Yeah, typically when countries and when individuals are thriving financially and are successful, they can afford to have the nice things. We can have nicer healthcare programs and we can have nicer dental care programs. But when your economy is suffering, you start to lose all those things. The consequences now of not building these projects is the collapse of our ability to support our healthcare system, the collapse of our ability to support our education and the rest of our social infrastructure. That very real threat, I think, has demonstrated to people how important these projects are to our prosperity, but also to our sovereignty. Canada has trailed all OECD countries in GDP growth for the last 10 years.
And projected to for the next 30 years.
And that's exactly the trend that needs to be reversed, because one of the things that's happening is we are being outbid by other countries for doctors and nurses and all these other things. So there's a reason why we're seeing a healthcare shortage or a healthcare worker shortage here in Canada, is because we can't pay them enough. But other countries, as their economies are growing, are able to outbid this talent pool for us. So the conversation around the environment has been shifted because the things that we value the most as Canadians or in terms of government services might just completely be unsustainable if we don't do these things.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So there's a couple of other issues that I'm wondering whether or not they are going to make a difference. One is both parties are running around saying, well, we're going to cut personal taxes. The Liberals say we're going to do it by this. The Conservatives say, well, we're going to do more. And the Conservatives say, well, we're going to take off tax GST on new home purchases. And now the Liberals have jumped on. Are these issues that are going to sway people much?
Not specifically. These are more tonal issues. Every campaign wants to demonstrate that they have a feel and a care and a plan for these issues. I don't think that the housing crisis is solvable in a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year period. So these policy announcements about GST and income tax cuts. They're just signals to show that, hey, we're aware of the problem, but they're not really fundamental to solving the underlying issues of what we've been struggling with in terms of housing affordability and economic growth.
So what concerns me about both of those is they're saying, okay, as a government, we're going to reduce the amount of money that we're going to bring in. And already we're running record deficits.
Yeah.
is not the ability to manage like the government books vitally important? Because if we don't do that, we're going to wind up very quickly in a situation that we were in back in the 1990s when we had to make drastic cuts.
I kind of feel that we're almost there. 10 cents of every tax dollar we send to Ottawa is used to pay the interest on the national debt. And so that's 10 cents that's not going to healthcare. That's 10 cents that's not going to defense spending or whatever other government priorities they are. So our fiscal capacity is dramatically decreasing. And that's why I think a big part of this election campaign has seen the Liberals, which have historically been opposing these projects, looking to the resource sector to try to bail them out of the hole that they've dug themselves into. There is no other way out, unfortunately.
Well, I guess they do have an advantage in the fact that Mark Carney is an economist. He was the governor of the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of England. No matter what he did, I mean, his credentials look pretty good. Is that a deciding factor here?
Yeah, like I think it has been, because again, by bringing, arguably one of the most influential, or at least most high-profile economists in Canadian history to the forefront, they've taken the economy as they've taken the impetus away from the Conservatives of being the party that understands the economy the best. And so the economy, for the first time in a long time, is the ballot box question. And like I said, they brought the most prominent economist in Canadian history to be leader of their party. It's almost reminiscent of the Liberals bringing in Pearson from the bureaucracy to come in and lead them. So this seems to be an old playbook that the Liberals have pulled out from chapters gone by.
So to recap, it looks to me when I take a look at the polling from 338 today that the Liberals are at 39%. They're projecting 178 seats, which is an outright majority. The Conservatives at 37% and 130 seats. What happens to Mr. Poilievre if those are the outcomes?
Yeah, Conservatives have not been a party of forgiving people. They have not been forgiving of leaders that lose elections. Harper loses election, he was gone in short order. Scheer loses election, he was gone in short order. Same thing with Erin O'Toole. It's hard to predict that Pierre would survive the fate that his predecessors did. But there's also an argument to be made that at some point Conservatives need to stick with something. And that's ultimately going to be a debate that is going to be had at the convention floor. That's ultimately a debate that the caucus will have with itself. But it will be raucous if that's the outcome.
Well, and don't they automatically every September have a leadership review?
Yeah, every couple of years there is an automatic leadership review, but the Conservatives also have the ability to remove their leader at the caucus level as well too, which is a dynamic that doesn't exist in the Liberal Party. So it was ultimately the caucus that got rid of Erin O'Toole. So there are dynamics there that that could start to manifest if people are unhappy with the outcome.
Well, the next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting to follow. Thanks for coming in and sharing your thoughts and insights.
Thanks for having me.